All right, real big fight this weekend. Really looking forward to it. Anthony Joshua trying to revenge a loss to the WBA, WBO, and IBF heavyweight champion Andy Ruiz in Saudi Arabia for some reason. Let's talk about, man, some craziness that happened at the last face-off. Andy Ruiz said something that was wild. Let's talk about that and this fight in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel, subscribers. If you are not subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. And also, I want to say special thank you to the new channel members, to the Patreon community, also to the live stream community. Please make sure that you come by OG Boxing Talk this Sunday. We're going to have a special guest on the show, one of the best, the biggest heavyweight boxing channels, experts on YouTube. My man, Mr. Boxing Today 2 is going to be a special guest along with myself, Blood Boxing, KQKC Boxing, Trap House Boxing, and my man, the boxing historian, Curtis Anderson. Really great show that where we wrap up the weekend. You'll really enjoy it. All right, let's get into Andy Ruiz. And still, oh man, that was hilarious, man. They were at the face-off. And I'm just reviewing the fights, right? I'm going through I watched the last several fights for Andy Ruiz, watched the last several fights for Anthony Joshua. I made sure that I watched the Andy Ruiz-Joseph Parker fight, and I watched the Anthony Joshua-Joseph Parker fight, and I had some interesting things, man, that came out of that fight, watching that fight. Before I talk about that, there was a guy in the crowd that said, two times, obviously referring to Anthony Joshua being a two-time heavyweight world champion. Now, there is some cachet that comes along with being a two-time heavyweight champion, right? There's not a lot of people that have regained their championship after they lost them. Guys like Hasim Rahman failed to do that. He was, a one-fight wonder against Lennox Lewis. A whole bunch of fights did that. Leon Spinks with Muhammad Ali, right? Didn't regain it, lost it, never got it again, right? So there is something to being a two-time heavyweight world champion. And I know that is where a lot of boxing fans are going to go after this fight with Anthony, if Anthony Joshua is able to win. Anthony Joshua became the two-time heavyweight champion. Deontay Wilder's only won it one time. Now Anthony Joshua's won 3 belts. He's won it 6 times. He's now a 6 times world champion because he had all 3 belts, and now he won them all again. So now he's a 6-time world champion. You know how that shit goes. People are going to come up with all kind of crazy ways to inflate their fighter, which is, it's part of boxing. A lot of this stuff is subjective. But when Andy Ruiz looked at him dead in his eye and said, and still answering the guy in the crowd, shout out to Mr. Boxing Today too, because he's the first one that, in his live stream where he covered this, pointed me to that. So shout out to Mr. Boxing Today. Looking dead in Anthony Joshua's face, answers the guy in the crowd and says, and still, like, dog, I'm about to whoop this boy. And still. So, man, that was interesting. It was nice to see that. That was very entertaining. I'm really looking forward to this fight very, very much, man. I got to figure out what time the fight is, though, because my understanding is, these fights are usually Saturday nights, but this is going to be in Saudi Arabia. So I think it's some early morning show. I got to actually figure out what time the fight is and but when I do that, dude, I'm going to be there. I'm definitely going to be covering on a live stream, talking about it. So you guys make sure that you come check it out on a live stream. But when I was looking at these, I went back and looked at these fights, and I can see why Andy Ruiz says, and still. Now, hindsight is 2020. You know that saying, like, when you're looking backwards, you can see a whole lot of stuff that you didn't see when you were watching it real time. So when I went back and I looked at these fights, and I looked at Andy Ruiz's fight against Joseph Parker, and I looked at Anthony Joshua's fight against Joseph Parker, I saw something that I had not noticed before. Now, first, I didn't notice it because one fight was several years ago. I think it was Andy Ruiz fought Joseph Parker maybe 3 years ago, like 2016. And The fight with Joseph Parker was in 2018 for Anthony Joshua. But when I looked at them back to back, I noticed something significant. I believe that Andy Ruiz put up a better fight against Joseph Parker than Anthony Joshua did. Like, I'm watching the fight and watching how it plays out, and I'm looking like I saw in the 12 rounds, because both those fights were 12 rounds. I saw Andy Ruiz land significantly better shots on Anthony Joshua I saw Andy Ruiz land significantly better shots and more consistent shots when he was letting those 2-3 punch combinations go and those left hooks go than Anthony Joshua did when he fought Joseph Parker. So, and I looked at like the way that Andy Ruiz was stalking Joseph Parker and Joseph Parker was fighting on the back foot, which is pretty much the same way that he fought Anthony Joshua, but Andy Ruiz did a better job of it. And so now I think they were both close fights. And the scorecards, obviously, I believe that the scorecards for Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz were ridiculous. I mean, I thought Anthony Joshua, Joseph Parker were ridiculous, but it showed me looking at those three fighters. Now, the soul circles, the whole, triangle theory stuff really doesn't work in boxing when you look at it this way. Like, because Joseph Parker won a fight against Andy Ruiz and Anthony Joshua won a fight against Joseph Parker, that means Anthony Joshua is going to beat Andy Ruiz. I know that doesn't work like that. But when you look at the relative performance and the skill sets of these guys, all in that, the three different fighters looking in those two different fights, these guys were all roughly the same skill level. There was no big gap in skill level. There's no significant gap in skill level between the three of those fights, between the three of those fighters. So going into, like I said, hindsight is 2020. Going back, like if I had just looked at those two fighters, those fights now, and looked at Anthony Joshua fighting Andy Ruiz, if you took all the hype out of what people say about Anthony Joshua and how, what they used to say about him, because they ain't really saying about it anymore, man, these guys are comparable fighters. And it really shouldn't have been that big a surprise that Andy Ruiz beat Anthony Joshua last time. The knockouts, seeing as Andy Ruiz really did hit Joseph Parker with some left hooks nice left hooks. And, Andy Ruiz hey, don't let that smile fool you, man. I didn't realize that Andy Ruiz was such a, skirted the lines of the rules so much. Man, he was breaking and swinging on the break a whole bunch against Joseph Parker, man. But anyway, it was a really good fight. I think I could see how somebody could say that Andy Ruiz beat Joseph Parker, and but on the same side, I can see why some people would say, nah, I think Joseph Parker pulled that out, because Joseph Parker was really good. He was good fighting on the back foot. He was landing nice jabs, and he was doing his thing. But he did get clocked a good amount, and I could see how somebody could say he lost that fight. Now, looking forward and what that means to me in this rematch, look, man, if it goes the distance, I remain the same. I'm saying the same thing if this thing goes the distance. If it goes the distance and Anthony Joshua has not been knocked down 7 times, I find the scorecard is going to go to Anthony Joshua. That's my heart. That's my feeling. And it's doubled now that I looked at those fights again. Because if Joseph Parker had fought if Joseph Parker did not fight as well against, if Anthony Joshua had fought Andy Ruiz, man, make sure I say this right. Sorry. It just did not look like, it looked like Joseph Parker got a better decision, fought a worse fight, but got a win against Andy Ruiz. That's where I am. Sorry. It looked like Joseph Parker got a win against Andy Ruiz in a fight that he did not perform as well in as the fight against Anthony Joshua. the way that I looked at it, which is telling me that Anthony Joshua, and because obviously the fight with Ruiz was in New Zealand, which was basically home cooking for for Joseph Parker. And in the Joseph Parker fight against Anthony Joshua, it was Joseph Parker that was on the road. Man, it's telling you that Anthony Joshua's home cooking came into play significantly in that fight with Joseph Parker. And I still don't understand how anybody could have Anthony Joshua up on the cards against Andy Ruiz in their fight. So as far as the fight goes, I can see Andy Ruiz knocking him out again. I can, because on the inside, that quick left hook and the fact that Anthony Joshua got that shady, that real suspect chin. If a ref allows those guys to fight in close and tie up at all, Andy Ruiz is going to hit him with that overhand right coming up out of there and dent that can even more than it's already dented. But anyway, man, I can see how somebody would be and Andy Ruiz truly believe that he will still be the champion after this fight. Let me know what you think in the comment section. With that, I'm out. Peace.